We've held up the prosthetic to Lee's arm, check where it's going to go, and then I've measured out some Telesis Adhesive, Telesis 5 and Telesis Thinner into little cups, and got my little glue brush, and we're going to put just a little bit on the back of the prosthetic as like an anchor point. All right, now let's get the rest of the anchor down. Let's get a little bit of glue, a little bit of thinner to help the glue glide. We'll just make sure that's all smooth before we blend off the edges. Let's get the bottom part down too. I'm gonna get extra adhesive down the edges. Try and get those stretched out a little bit, not too much because then they can look a bit wrinkly. So trying to find the right amount of stretch. I'm gonna move on to a smaller brush to get those edges. So let's start up here. Because this has got a nice tight flashing, we can just run it right along to that edge. I'm gonna get my acetone around these edges. I have this little acetone dispenser. And get a little brush, and you just need a tiny bit of acetone. We're gonna run that just along the edge of this flashing and pull that off. And I usually find it easier to break this off. Now we're just gonna go around the edges, and anywhere that I think needs just a little bit more smoothing, we'll go over a little bit of acetone. But again, you don't want this to go too close to the prosthetic, because if you blend away too much cap plastic, you're done. Death sentence. The next step is getting some Prosaide Cream. Yep. I like to get it on just like a little cotton tip. And then dip my red Stipple Sponge that's been torn off onto it. This will give us a nice texture around the edge of this wound, just to help disguise that edge further. All right, we're gonna mix up some Bluebird Matte Sealer. This is going to mattify the shine of this cap plastic and Prosaide combo, and also going to take away the stickiness of the Prosaide. So I'm going to thin it out in this cup, a little tiny drop of matte sealer and a drop of alcohol, about 50-50. You don't need much. So I'm going to get the dark Complexion palette, and I'm going to use a chip brush to spatter it, and I'm going to mix the two colors in the lid with some extra alcohol. Something kind of like that. Then we're going to spatter this on, like so. I'm going to get this lighter one, bamboo one, and we're going to just bring it up here where the farmer's hand ends. I'm going to start building up a slightly dark, I need a little tiny bit of blue, I think. Just forget how orange some of these are. There's this coral blue here. I'm going to add a little bit of that. That helps. And I'm going to bring it in with a little bit of darkness, and then we can pat it back if it's too dark. I feel like something like that, just really like thin. Maybe a tiny bit of cool tone blue over everything as well. You know I love me some cool tone blue. I guess it still needs to go a little bit darker, but I'm going to add some highlights first while we're on it. I'm going to do some of this pastel yellow, do some pinks, and then we'll return for the darker colors. Okay, and just like a tiny bit of this DT blush. If it's a midnight brown and some coral blue. Just gonna get a clean paper towel and some alcohol and just take back just a little bit of this darkness. So the reference image has a lot of pink areas, so we're gonna start marking out a couple of pink areas where it's a bit scarred, a little bit healing. I'm gonna combine this light mauve with the dusty rose in the lid here. Kind of around the crust is a good area to have some of these pink sore spots. So I'm just going to mark them out first with my brush. And we'll have one kind of up along here. Do a little bit there too. Maybe on the side of the... All right, and I'm going to play around with something different for this application. Try putting down a little bit of this silicone to make it a little bit chunkier. So these are the Dermaflage. This is in the color Inflamed, and you get this little mixing tip that pre-mixes it. Definitely don't need to have this to apply this. I just thought it would be fun to experiment with this application. Create a bit of extra texture and color with the thick silicone layers. But I do like the colors that these are, the intrinsic colors in them, they're really pretty. Just blending out the edges a little bit. We'll pop just a bit down here too. Just gonna make this one a slightly different shape. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more colors to the cut itself now while that is curing. It only takes a couple of minutes to cure. So let's get a mix of these pinks going on. Start with some dark mauve and dusty rose blended together. Thanks. And I'll probably end up darkening this with some browns as well. Just gonna mix these two, Age Spot and Freckle. Gonna add a couple of areas of this darker Age Spot just to make it look a bit gnarlier in some spots, a bit more scabby. Oh, I really like that inflamed color on top of that little bit of pink. It looks really nice. You don't have to do much to it. Let's start with little bits of this pus yellow, and then we're going to go in with little bits of this deep color for the scabs, and then we're going to layer alcohol paints on top of that. And I'm just going to kind of like dot this on, and then I won't blend this one as much because I do want to kind of keep its texture that comes out. You kind of look around. So it kind of tends to be like around things. You can still move it around a little bit as it's curing. And try and create like little ridges or anything. Okay, let's get our deep silicone on. Okay, this one is actually quite light. I'm going to use this to kind of create like the scabs around here. This is thicker actually. Wonder what's happened to this one. But it works well for our purpose because we kind of want it to be thicker and give us more of that texture anyway. Oh, I like this. I'm going to just kind of put some scabby bits in amongst the stitches. Like it's just kind of scabbed over it. Gives us some nice chunk. So we're going to start with some pinks for the coloring. Maybe like the red rum and the dark mauve. I'm just going to add some kind of sour bits into these pink areas. So just going to kind of dot in and around. Because it is pure silicone, it's going to be like a little bit harder to color, but this should be fine. Just doing little tiny dots on it. So you don't want to make it too similar, so I'm going to make this little area a bit sorer than the others. And then I'm maybe even going to put like just a little bit of red rum in some of this area. Okay, now let's go on to more infected colors in the Necromania palette. I'm going to start with the Vile Bile, aka Leah's favorite color. Going to use this to color around. Actually, I might just soften this color a little bit just by adding a tiny bit of Dark Moss to it. Just mute it a tiny bit because it's looking very bright on here. Okay, let's go over it with some Dark Moss now. I'm going to use the Age Spot and Tea Stain just to get a little bit of darker scabby bits happening. What I want to do is just get a bit of a really dark scab thing happening. I'm going to get the Fleet Street drying paste and Scab, and what I want to do actually, because of the current consistency of it, I'm going to spread it on the back of my hand thinly and let it dry into like these kind of scabby sheets that I can put on top of the scabs here. You can see it's quite dark. So just gonna thin that out. Okay, so now I've got literally just like some cat plastic. So if you run prosthetics at home, you might just have extra cat plastic on your running table you can pull off. I'm gonna use this just to give us nice flaky bits that you can't quite achieve with really much else. Just gonna use the same silicone adhesive. And I'm gonna look for where this looks the most flaky. And I'm gonna put a little bit of silicone adhesive down. And then put down this cat plastic. And then we'll blend it out and rip it up and give us some flaky skin goodness. Okay, and then because it's cat plastic, we're going to blend it out using our trusty dusty acetone. But I want to leave the top a little bit away from the skin just so we can rip up that center bit to make it look like skin that's a bit flaky. So what I might do before we rip that up is just go over it really lightly with something just slightly closer to your skin tone so it doesn't look as white when it's ripped up. And just like a fluffy, let's do this little tiny stipple brush. Let's try this gray shadow color from Bluebird. All right, and then we'll rip that up in a minute. Just let the acetone evaporate, and we can add that, and we'll add some of our chunky scab paste. We'll do that first, and then the scab paste afterwards. I like that this has given us that kind of gloss of that fresh, still healing wound. We might even go over everything that needs to be mattified with a little bit more mattifier. Let's use a cream one. We're going to use a liquid powder shine eliminator. Just gonna go over any areas that need to be mattified again, so like cat plastic edges and things, like up around here. Mattify those edges. Okay, let's get a blunt object or fingernails. And we will pull up some of this cat plastic without trying to pinch Leah's actual skin. Yeah, something kind of like this. Oh, but I'm just pulling off this scab paste from my hand. And we're going to put it on different places with a little bit of silicone adhesive. Let's bring a little bit of scabs in here. This, and we'll blend out those edges a little bit. I'm going to mix together the red rum and the age spot to give us something similar looking. We'll blend out those edges a little bit. So what I might do is get cotton tips and isopropyl alcohol. I'm just going to soften a couple of areas. Okay, I think we're done